Last time, we spent time with the people of the Mary Celeste in their last ordinary days. Captain Benjamin Briggs writing his final letter to his mother, for days before departure, telling her everything was fine, that the crew was capable, that the ship was in beautiful trim. Sarah Briggs settling into the cabin, arranging her sewing, securing the Melodeon against rough weather, making the small domestic arrangements that transform a ship into a home. Little Sophia, 2 years old, her toys arranged on her bunk, her world entirely her parents, going where they went, not understanding where that was or what it meant. Edward Head, 23 years old, newly married, telling his wife Emma he would be home before Christmas, and then the Atlantic weather turning. The storms of November pressing down on a laden ship making her way east toward the Azores. 9 barrels of alcohol mysteriously empty, their contents building up in the hold. Invisible, potentially explosive, potentially the beginning of everything. The last log entry dated November 25th. Position near Santa Maria in the Azores. Everything normal. Nothing alarming. And then 9 days of silence. This is episode 3. This is the morning of December 4th, 1872. This is the discovery. The De Gratia was a Canadian brigantine, 195 tons, smaller than the Mary Celeste, carrying a cargo of petroleum from New York to Gibraltar. She had left New York on November 15th, 8 days after the Mary Celeste. She was following roughly the same route across the Atlantic, the standard route for ships bound for the Mediterranean, east and south toward the Azores, then east through the Strait of Gibraltar. Her captain was David Reed Morehouse, 40 years old, an experienced Atlantic sailor, a Nova Scotian, a quiet and careful man by all accounts. He knew Benjamin Briggs. They were not close friends, but they were acquaintances of long standing, the kind of professional friendship that develops between men who work the same routes and meet in the same ports over many years. They had last seen each other in New York just before their respective departures. They had dined together, talked about the voyage ahead, about the weather, about the cargo. Morehouse respected Briggs, considered him a competent and careful captain, the kind of man who did not take unnecessary risks. On the morning of December 4th, 1872, the De Gratia was approximately 400 miles east of the Azores. The helmsman on watch was a man named John Johnson. He had been at the wheel for several hours. The morning was gray, cold, the Atlantic moving in the heavy slow swells of December, the sky overcast. The kind of morning that is not unpleasant exactly, but that reminds you of how far from land you are. At approximately 1 in the afternoon, Johnson saw something on the horizon. A ship. Moving, but wrong. He watched for a moment, trying to understand what he was seeing. A ship that was moving, but not the way a ship with a helmsman moves. Moving with the wind, but not directed by it. Responding to the sea, but not controlled against it. Yawing, falling off course, correcting only by accident as the wind shifted. Johnson called for the captain. Morehouse came on deck, raised his glass, looked at the distant vessel, and recognized her. The Mary Celeste, the ship his friend Benjamin Briggs had sailed 8 days before him from New York. She should have been in Genoa by now, or close to it. She should not have been here, 400 miles east of the Azores, moving without direction, moving without purpose. Morehouse ordered course changed toward her. Something was wrong. He did not yet know how wrong. The De Gratia drew alongside the Mary Celeste at around 3 in the afternoon. Morehouse hailed her, called across the water, his voice carrying on the cold Atlantic air. No answer. He hailed again, louder, the kind of shout a man makes when he already suspects something is very wrong, but is not ready to believe it yet. No answer. The Mary Celeste moved beside them, her sails partly set and moving with the wind, her deck visible from the De Gratia. Empty. Nobody at the wheel. Nobody in the rigging. Nobody anywhere. Morehouse ordered a boarding party. 3 men went across in a small boat. Oliver Deveau, the first mate. John Wright, the second mate. John Johnson, the helmsman who had first spotted her. They came alongside the Mary Celeste and climbed aboard. Deveau went first. He stepped onto the deck of the Mary Celeste and stood for a moment, just looking. He would later testify at the salvage hearing in Gibraltar about what he found. His testimony is one of the most remarkable documents in the history of maritime investigation. What Oliver Deveau found below deck is the heart of the mystery of the Mary Celeste. The forward hatch was open, the cover lying to one side. Below was the cargo hold. He went down and looked. All 1701 barrels of alcohol were there, secured in their positions. The cargo undisturbed, except that 9 of the barrels were empty, not broken, not leaking in any obvious way, just empty, their contents gone. Into the air of the hold over the preceding weeks, there was water in the hold, 3.5 feet of it, sloshing in the darkness below the cargo. This sounds like a lot. In a ship of the Mary Celeste size, it was not actually dangerous. Not enough to sink her. Not enough to cause serious concern to an experienced captain who understood his ship. But to a captain who was already frightened, to a captain who had been smelling alcohol fumes rising from his cargo for days, to a captain who perhaps thought the water was rising faster than it was, it might have looked very different. Deveau went to the crew's quarters. The men's belongings were there, clothing, personal items, the small private things that sailors carry with them on long voyages. Everything present, everything in its place. As if the men had simply stepped out for a moment. He went to the captain's cabin. The log was open on the desk. Last entry, November 25th. The ink long dry. The position recorded carefully. Everything normal in the writing. No hint of alarm. Sarah Briggs's sewing things were on the table. Her needle still threaded. The work she had been doing still held in place by the hoop she had been using. As if she had set it down for a moment and would pick it up again shortly, the Melodeon was in its place, secured against rough weather as she had arranged it. Silent now. The silence of an instrument that belonged to someone who was no longer there to play it. In the sleeping area, Sophia's toys were on the bunk. The small wooden doll, the carved animal, arranged with the particular care that a child arranges her things. Not thrown, not scattered, placed by a 2-year-old girl who had been here, who had lived here, who had been as real and present as the toys she left behind. Deveau stood in that cabin for a long time. He would later say that the ship looked like a ship whose crew had expected to return. Everything suggested a temporary absence, a short errand, a brief departure with the intention of coming back. But they had not come back, and they never would. The one thing missing from the Mary Celeste that told the clearest story was the lifeboat. Every ship of that era carried lifeboats. The Mary Celeste's single lifeboat had been stored on deck above the main hatch. A wooden boat, large enough to hold all 10 people. The kind of boat you took to shore when anchored offshore. The kind of boat you launched in an emergency. It was gone. The davits that had held it in place were still there. The ropes that had secured it were still there. But the boat itself was gone. Launched, lowered into the water, departed. With it were gone the navigational instruments, the sextant, the chronometer, the tools a captain uses to determine position at sea, the tools without which you cannot know where you are in the open ocean. These had been taken deliberately, carefully, not in a panic. A man in a blind panic does not stop to collect his navigational instruments. A man who intends to navigate from a small boat across the open Atlantic takes his navigational instruments with him. Also missing were the ship's papers, the official documents, the registration, the certificates, the things a captain needs to identify himself and his vessel when he arrives in port. These too were taken deliberately. These two suggest a man who expected to arrive somewhere, who expected to need to identify himself, who expected to survive. Deveau stood on the deck of the Mary Celeste in the December afternoon and thought about what all this meant. The ship was seaworthy. Her cargo was intact. Her food and water were untouched. Her crew's belongings were in their quarters. A child's toys were on a bunk below. But 10 people had gotten into a single lifeboat, had taken their navigational instruments and their papers, had left everything else, had cast off from a perfectly good ship, and had sailed away into the North Atlantic in December, in a lifeboat, where the nearest land was hundreds of miles away, where the weather could turn deadly in hours, where 10 people in a small wooden boat were entirely at the mercy of the sea. Deveau looked at the empty ocean around him, vast, cold, gray, indifferent. He looked for a long time. There was nothing to see. Deveau and the other 2 men from the day Gratia spent several hours on the Mary Celeste that afternoon. They pumped out the water in the hold. They checked the rigging. They assessed the ship's condition. She was sound. She was seaworthy. She could be sailed. Deveau went back to the day Gratia and reported to Morehouse. Morehouse listened to everything. Then he sat for a long time without speaking. He was thinking about Benjamin Briggs, about the man he had dined with in New York just weeks ago, about the conversation they had about the voyage ahead, about the weather and the cargo and the route. He was thinking about Sarah Briggs. He had met her, knew her slightly, the way you know the wives of professional acquaintances. A pleasant woman, clearly capable, clearly at ease with the life she had chosen. He was thinking about a 2-year-old girl he had probably never met, who had toys on a bunk on an empty ship in the middle of the Atlantic. He made his decision. He would take the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar. He could not leave her. A seaworthy ship abandoned in the Atlantic was a salvage opportunity under maritime law. His crew was entitled to compensation for bringing her in. That was the legal reality. But I think there was more to it than legal reality. I think David Morehouse could not leave that ship floating empty in the Atlantic. Could not sail away and leave Sarah Briggs's sewing on the table and Sophia's toys on the bunk and the Melodeon in its place in the cabin. Could not leave all of that to drift until the ship eventually foundered or ran aground somewhere. He put Deveau and 2 other men aboard the Mary Celeste to sail her to Gibraltar, and the 2 ships set course together. The day Gratia and the ghost ship she was escorting, moving through the December Atlantic, toward Gibraltar, toward a salvage hearing that would raise more questions than it answered, toward a mystery that would never be fully solved. This is episode 3 of the Mary Celeste. What happened at the salvage hearing in Gibraltar, what the investigators found, and what dark suspicions fell on the men of the day Gratia. That is a story for episode 4. Subscribe to Grey Archive Tales and come back. We will be waiting.